Do you know indices is related to standard form and logarithm, or even sort? What is indices? Indices simply means exponents. Indices means exponents, exponents, power, yes, or power. So indices simply means exponents or power. So how do we solve math questions involving indices? And do not forget that in other subjects, um, standard form, we do have indices there too. So we use the knowledge of indices in standard form. We use the knowledge of indices even in sort and also in logarithm. So the laws of indices are the same, yeah, with the laws of logarithm. So now let's look at the laws of indices. What are the laws of indices? What are the laws of indices? So the first one is what you can call the multiplication law. So let's call it the multiplication law. So the multiplication law. So the multiplication law simply says that when you multiply, you add the exponent. For example, we have a raised to power 1 multiplied by a raised to power 2. So that simply becomes a raised to power 1 plus 2. So that is the multiplication law. And also we have the division law. So what is the division law of indices? The division law of indices says that when you divide, you take away the exponent. So using a as our base as well. So let's have a raised to power 3 divided by a raised to power 2. So that simply means a raised to power 3 minus 2. So which is going to give us a raised to power 1. So in this case, we have a raised to power 3. So that is for the addition. So for that, we also have the zero power law. So that is the zero power law. Let's look at the zero power law. The zero power law says that anything raised to power 0 is equal to 1. So this simply means that a raised to power 0 is equal to 1. So meaning that any figure that has the exponent of 1, exponent of 0 is equal to 1, is equal to 1. As you can see, we use this also in conversion of bases, like other bases to base 10. So where we have any figure is by 0, then we have it to be equal to 1. So as you can see, they are related, very related. So aside that, we also have the powers of power law. So the powers of power law. So what I like to call the power of power law, let's have it like this. So I like to call it the power of power. So the power of power law. So what does the power of power law says? It says that if we have a raised to power, let's say n into bracket of a raised to power uh, m, a raised to power m. So what this means is that you multiply the exponent. That means you have the first exponent inside the bracket on the base and the other exponent outside the bracket outside the base. So that means you multiply them. That becomes a raised to power n multiplied by m. Let's put it that way. So that is the power of power law. So we also have the negative power law. The negative power law. Let's continue the law here. So we have the negative power law. Negative power law. So what negative power law says is that anything raised to negative will become a fraction. For example, a raised to power negative 1 will be equal to 1 over a. And okay, let's make our exponent to be bigger than 1. So that would be a, let's have a raised to power negative 3. That would be 1 on a raised to power 3. So that is a negative power law. That will be 1 divided by a raised to power 3. So that is a negative power law. So aside the negative power law, we also have the fractional law. Fractional law. So the fractional law is in two types. Let's look at the fractional law. Okay, so after the fractional law, which means that anything raised to power that has the exponent of a fraction, you multiply, like let's say we have a raised to power 2 over 3, a raised to power 2 over 3. So that is going to be, the denominator here will be the root, that will be the cube root of a raised to power 2. So meaning that you have to find the cube root of the figure first, of the base first, then you uh, now find the exponent, that is the number of the exponents it has. So I think these are the basic rules in indices. Please, in case you've not subscribed to this channel, please help to subscribe and put on the notification button to know when new videos are uploaded. So the laws of indices are just these little ones that we've had, and we can also have the in a fractional law we may also have a fraction in a power like this. Let's have this, like we have a over b into brackets of, let's say, n. So that simply means a raised to power n divided by b raised to power n. So that's also under the fractional law. Under the fractional law. So, but one thing I would like you to note in this law is that when you have a fraction as the exponent, just know that the denominator is your root. So that will bring the radical sign on the base, while the numerator is the exponent. So now let's have a basic revision on all these laws of indices, and you try to learn them while we solve some questions in our next video, or you watch the all-in-one video that has everything. Please subscribe to this channel. So the first law is the division law, which means is the multiplication law, which means that when you are multiplying in indices, you add the exponent. You add the exponent. The second is the division law, which means that when you divide in indices, you take away the exponent. So that's what that means. The zero power law, that means that anything raised to power 0 is equal to 1. So that's a basic. And the power of power means that when you have this like this, a power inside of a bracket and a power outside of a bracket, you just multiply the two powers. So that's the power of power. And the negative power law, as we have it here, means that when you have anything raised to negative, so that means the negative sign will make the base a denominator, while the exponent will just be there like this. So, and the negative will just make the base to be a denominator. So that's exactly what we have here when we have a raised to power negative 3, and that's, you see that the exponent here will be the new base, while the negative sign means that it is a denominator. So meaning it says send it to division. While the next one is the fractional law. So in a fractional law, what it simply means is that anything raised to power that has the power of a fraction, it means that you divide with the denominator of the fraction and you multiply with the numerator of the fraction. And in case you have a fraction like this as well, what it simply means is that these two, since they are joined together by a bracket, they both share these exponents. They both share that exponent. In another way, you may also have a two figure in a bracket that is a power of product. Let's look at the power of product before we call it a day. So the power of products. So the power of products. So let's look at the power of product. So what power of product simply means is that in case you have something like AB into exponent of let's say n, let's use n, that is the unknown. So what this simply means is that a raised to power n multiplied by b raised to power n. So you should know that in case you have something like let's say we have 2x raised to power 2x raised to power let's say we have 2x2 raised to power 4. So what is this simply means is that our 2 raised to power of 4. So which will be multiplied by our x raised to power of these two. We have to use the product, the power of power law here. So that is going to be 8. It will be 8. So that means in this case, you're going to have 16x raised to power 8 as the final result. So this is the power of product rule. That means when you have products and they have the same power, and that's just. So it's not about actually the names. It's not about the names that they are called. It's understanding that matters. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe and put on the notification bell.